Hi, I'm Chris Huff, the creator of God Chosen. Today, I want to share a little bit with you about the story of why the game was invented, as well as some of the gameplay mechanics. So, I am a USA expat living in southern Poland, and I do a part-time job teaching English to students here, from anywhere from about 6 years old up to 18 years old. And when COVID hit, I wanted to create something for my students that they could interact with because all of our lessons switched to online learning. And online learning is very difficult, especially for kids. They don't want to engage so much, they don't turn on their cameras so that you can actually have a conversation face to face. And there wasn't really a whole lot of engagement, and that's really bad when you're teaching the language to somebody. So I created this game as a way to try and force my students to engage more with me and actually have to speak useful sentences, that kind of stuff. It started out with Google Draw and a share screen on Skype or Discord servers, and I created all of these little symbols and lines and everything in Google Draw, and we just did everything by word of mouth. It became so popular with my students, I decided to make a physical copy of the game for myself and my family and to play with my students in the future when it was safe to meet with them again. After this, when I started to meet with students again in person and we played the game, there was even more interest, and some of my students started asking me if they could buy a copy of the set when I made one for myself. This got me thinking. So then I started joining some Facebook groups and some forums and asking questions, how do we do this? How do we make a game? Is it worth it? And I got so much feedback and so much interest in the game from complete strangers. Within a week, I had at least 10 more people telling me that they wanted to buy this game. The concept was amazing. They couldn't wait to play it. So I decided to go for it, to create a Kickstarter. I built a prototype. We 3D modeled everything. We planned it. We found the materials. We sourced everything, created the first prototype, created the Kickstarter, and now it's almost a year later from when I first had the concept of the game, and we just got funded on Kickstarter yesterday. So one of the feedbacks I got on Kickstarter was that there wasn't enough information on the page to show how the gameplay works or the story of the game. So I really wanted to come in here and create a video for you guys that explained that better. Now, I already had a video, but due to my lack of technical skills, that video wasn't uploaded properly at the launch. And then when I tried to re-upload it, it turned out the file was corrupted because I had moved some of the files around and I didn't save the video outside of the program. So we're creating a new video today. This is it. We're gonna share with you guys a little bit of how the gameplay works so that you can have a better understanding of God Chosen. In God Chosen, you have 16 playable classes or characters, and the game is comprised of the players and the NPCs, or the non-player characters. Now, there are two different ways to play the game. One is story mode and one is PvP, or player versus player. If I'm playing with another person and we want to just fight each other, like a chess match or something like this, then we will follow some of the rules in the instructions and pick our characters accordingly. So sometimes you can do it where you pick a character at random. Sometimes you do it where you pick characters blindly, so each of you choose what you want, but the other person doesn't get to see. Or you get to see what the other character picks, but you get to ban some of the choices from being played. So these are the three ways we suggest setting up a player versus player game. So for example, I might pick a paladin here, and my opponent then will get a chance to pick one. So my opponent takes the Shadowmancer. Okay? Now the zombie goes with the Shadowmancer. All right? Then I would pick another character, and we can either choose to play PvP with fighting two characters against two, 3 versus 3. We can do as many characters as we want, and the object of the player versus player game is simply to eliminate the opponent's characters. Whoever can eliminate all the other characters first wins that game. Now, we have a few mechanics of things that can go on the game board. We have rocks, we have bushes, we have walls, and we have doors. So when you're playing a PvP game, you need to decide with the person or people that you're playing with what elements you want to have on the map. So you decide ahead of time, do we have rocks, do we have bushes? And then you split those elements between each person. So in this case, we have 2 bushes, 2 rocks. We'll say we can have 2 walls and no doors. So my opponent will take 1 rock, 1 bush, 1 wall, and I will take the other ones, and we would get to place them on the map wherever we want. So I could put the 1 bush here, a rock here, and maybe I want to put a wall right here in the middle. My opponent will do the same, placing where he wants. Okay? Now, we will remove the characters that we're not playing with. And normally we would, you need a minimum for PvP to play with 2 characters, but for illustration purposes, we're just going to use our 1. Okay? Now, when you start a PvP match, or when you start a storyline match, the characters were always going to start in the middle 2 tiles, no matter which side of the board you're on. So I will start in either this tile or this tile. I cannot start all the way over here. I have to start here. So if I have 2 characters, 1 will be here, 1 will be here. Same with my opponent. Then we roll the dice to see who will go first. So I will take this dice, I roll it into the dice roller. I roll an 18. My opponent rolls the dice. He rolls a 19. He gets to start. He will go first. So the way that movement works, or the way that actions work in this game, is very simple. Each character has 3 action points. An action point can be used for one of 2 things. Either movement, if I move 1 tile, it uses up 1 action point. So I can move a maximum of 3 tiles in my turn to use all of my action points. Or I can use abilities. Abilities always use 2 action points. So that means if I move more than 1 tile, I cannot use an ability on the same turn. But if I move 1 tile, I still have 2 action points left over. I can then use an ability. So when you're playing the game, it's important to keep that in mind, that you can move and use an ability, but only if you move 1 tile. You are not allowed to move in a diagonal. This is not allowed. You can only move in forward, horizontal or vertical movements. Now, we have different mechanics with each of the characters. Each character has a unique passive, as well as 4 unique abilities. That information you can find on our website, or we will have it posted a little bit later on the Kickstarter page itself, I think. So, for example, I, on my turn, could move the paladin 1 place and then use my ability Blessed Hammer. Okay? This game is all about vocal cues. You need to announce what you're going to do, where your movements are, all of those things. So, for example, I would say my paladin moves forward 1, and then cast the ability Blessed Hammer. Blessed Hammer hits all tiles around the paladin for 1 roll of the dice, and then 2 tiles around the paladin for the 2nd roll of the dice. If any enemies are in that area, they will get hit for whatever damage value that is. So Blessed Hammer uses a 10-sided die. I would roll that die. I get a 4. That is the damage value for any enemy. So if my opponent was here, he would take 4 damage. Now, we can talk about how Critical Strike works. Critical Strike is when a character rolls an even number that is higher than half the value of the dice. So if my paladin had rolled a 6 instead of a 4, and my opponent was here, I would have a bonus effect to my ability. Now this is unique to the paladin. This is not the same for every character. Some characters do not have critical strikes. Some of them have completely different mechanics. But for the paladin, if I roll a 6, I get a critical strike on my enemy. I get to roll the dice again for bonus damage. So I roll again, and I got a 4. So the total amount of damage to this enemy would be 10. Now, you should always refer to your character cards for whether or not your character can have a critical strike, what the critical strike does, because it's different for some of the characters. And some characters, like the Berserker, which I will bring here in 1 second. Okay. operate a little bit differently than some of the other characters. Berserkers do not have critical strike. They have a mechanic called bleed. So the way that it works with them is that if I attack with a Berserker and I roll a even or an odd numbered dice, then I get to roll a bonus damage with a 10-sided die. This number is how much bleed damage this character does. And the bleed damage for the Berserker, for example, will heal him. So every character has different mechanics that will allow them to heal. They have different abilities for critical strikes. Some of them do not have critical strikes, but all of the characters have been balanced so that if a character does not have a critical strike, it's because they have some other benefit that is very important. For example, the Alchemist does not have critical strikes. However, if she is attacked or hit by any of the abilities, the elements that she uses, so one of the elements she can use is darkness. The Shadowmancer deals dark damage. So if he attacks her, her next ability is 100% increased. So she doesn't have a critical strike for any of her abilities, but she can take advantage of that by buffing herself or being buffed by a teammate or by taking damage, and then she can deal significant damage or healing based off of that. So that's why she doesn't have a critical strike, because she has a unique mechanic that allows her to do something a little bit different. Okay. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about a little bit is line of sight. This is very important in this game. Some characters have range for their abilities. Some characters can only use abilities based off of line of sight. So, bring back the Alchemist, for example. Right now we have a wall here and a wall here. I am not able to see my opponent. The wall blocks my line of sight. I cannot shoot through the wall, and I cannot destroy the wall. In order to get to my opponent, I would have to move all the way to here before my opponent can see me. Or I could see my opponent. Now, the Shadowmancer has a maximum range for his abilities of 5 tiles. But my Alchemist can use her abilities, or at least some of them, as far as she can see. So this is a very important thing for her. She wants to stay away from the Shadowmancer and use her abilities to attack him from range. So things like rocks will block line of sight. If my character is here, my opponent is here, we cannot see each other. We might know that we're in this position, but we're not allowed to attack each other. Okay? If I'm here, however, we can now see each other. Bushes work the same way. They block line of sight, but I can move my character into a bush, and then I can see outside of the bush, but an enemy may not see me. Bushes offer a kind of shield or protection. If my opponent is here and I go into the bush, he cannot hit me with a direct attack. If he tries to attack me, it will destroy the bush instead, and the bush is then removed from play. However, if my opponent has an area of effect ability, for example, my opponent has an ability that will allow him to detonate and explode his zombie or a corpse on the battlefield. So if his zombie was here, my character is in the bush, he detonates the zombie, explodes it, all tiles around the zombie take damage. That means the bush is destroyed and my character will take damage from this area of effect attack. Now, when a character dies, you flip over the tile and they become a corpse. Corpses are used by the Shadowmancer or some other characters for various things like raising zombies or to create bombs. The Shadowmancer can explode corpses to damage anyone around them. Okay, so a couple more mechanics that we want to go over before we explain what story mode is. We have markers. So marker tokens, you will get these in the game, and these can be used for a few different things. So, for example, we have zombie tokens for the Shadowmancer and for some of the other characters that can create zombies. But the Shadowmancer, his passive ability means that every 5th turn,
he can create a super zombie, or he can use one of his other spells in an enhanced way. So one of the things you can do is you can just use a marker to indicate that this zombie is not normal. This zombie is a more powerful zombie. This way, everybody who's playing knows what's going on. Okay. Another thing that the markers can be used for is for some characters, like this guy, the bomber. He has an ability that is called the mole bombs, where he can send out bombs to different tiles. So in this case, you would use the markers to indicate where he would put his bombs. So he could move them to here, 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 something like this. This way, as a player, you remember where the bombs are. Your opponents know where the bombs are. Everybody knows what's happening. You don't have to try to remember, oh, which square did I put it on? You can just put the marker here. Now, if you want to keep this it a secret where you put things, and you want to mentally try to remember it, and your opponents feel comfortable with you being honest about that, you don't have to use the markers, but we include those because we find it to be useful. Another thing the markers are used for is for a character like the assassin. When you're playing in player versus player, the assassin's passive is that she is invisible to anybody who is more than 2 tiles away from her. So if she's here, right now the bomber is 1, 2, 3 tiles away, because diagonals do not count. That would mean that the bomber cannot actually see her if they were on opposing sides. So the player who controls the bomber can put this token at the last place that he saw the assassin to try and remember where she is. If you're playing as the assassin, it is your responsibility to make sure that you move her the appropriate number of tiles and keep track of that mentally. Your opponent can use the marker for the last known place of your assassin. That way, if you end up over here 2 turns later, the opponent might say, okay, you need to show me how you were able to get there and prove that you were able to move that distance, something like this. This is to avoid any kind of claims of cheating or something like this. And you don't have to use the markers, it's just recommended. And we include these in the game. The other thing is the doors. Doors do not act like windows. You cannot see through them, but they allow you to pass through walls. So if there's a door here, then a character could move through the wall as if the wall wasn't there. However, they cannot see through the door. Once they move past the door to the other side, they would then gain line of sight of what's on the other side. The game comes with 2 dice, a 20-sided die, and a 10-sided die. The character cards, which I'll show an example of in just a minute, will show what die you need to use for what skill and how to use it properly. Everything is done with these dice. This is for all attacks, for all healing, everything like that. It's pretty simple. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about story mode. So, when you play story mode, there's one key difference from player versus player, and that is really where the name of the game comes from, and that is God Chosen. When you start the story mode, if you are playing by yourself or a single player, then you play with 2 characters. But if you're playing with friends, then you would each pick 1 character. And one of the things that you do when you start the game is you pick a patron god and their associated power. So I'll show you guys some of the god cards now. So we have a total right now of 16 gods, 8 Slavic gods and 8 Norse gods. In the future, we plan to incorporate different mythologies and gods from all around the world. That is one of our goals. We're already working on an Egyptian set called the Wrath of Ra, and we have an Atlantean set that is already in production that we've designed, and that will be one of our stretch goals. So you pick the god that you want to be the patron of, and the gods are sending you on this mission. The world is dying, the gods are losing their powers, and they can't materialize completely in the world anymore. So they want you to go on a quest for them and figure out what's going on. So you pick your character, you pick your god power, God powers can be used once per campaign. There are a total of 5 campaigns, and each campaign comprises of 3 to 5 maps, depending on the number of players or the difficulty that you want to experience. At the end or the last map or the end of each campaign, you will fight a boss. For example, this is the boss from the first campaign, Gongor. He is a forest guardian, and he has been corrupted by something, and you're tasked with either killing him or trying to save him from this corruption. So as a player, you will go through and play the game and clear the maps, defeat the bosses, and play out the storyline. The storyline is played out by the game master. So when you play story mode, one player needs to be designated as the game master. They will have a special handbook that I will show you here. In this handbook, it explains the different options and choices as well as what the maps should look like. So the game master is in charge of playing all of the non-player characters. So all of the enemies that you face and fight against, he's responsible or she is responsible for explaining the story, giving the players their options, what they can do. Now, I'm not going to go into all the detail of what that is. I'm not going to explain the whole story because I don't want to ruin the lore or the adventure for you guys. But that way you know when you sit down, let's say there's three friends sit down, or even 2 people sit down, one of them will play as the game master and facilitate the playing of the other player or players. Now, playing as the game master is fun in itself because you get a lot of action, you get to move the characters, you get to, basically do the most, and you're kind of in control. So you get to narrate the game, explain everything to the players. So it's a unique thing, but you don't play the game yourself in the same way. So we encourage people to use the elements. We use the walls, use the doors, the bushes, all of these different things. So we encourage players to build their own ideas also, right? We have the gameplay, we have the maps and the stories laid out for you, but you can use these elements to create your own storylines. I once played a game with a student who wanted to do a zombie invasion, and so he used a bunch of rocks for headstones, bushes, created a little graveyard. He played as a paladin, and I controlled a bunch of undead characters and zombies that jumped out of the bushes and tried to attack him, and his job was to purify this graveyard, make it, holy ground again. So you can really use the elements to create the game however you want and use your own storylines as well. So it gives a lot of options to you as the player for what you can do. Another thing to note is that depending on the type of characters you play as, the story might be a little bit different. So if you play, for example, as an undead, the maps that you go through are going to be the same, the bosses are going to be the same, but the actual storyline unfolds a little bit differently. The characters that you fight against are going to be a little bit different. If you play as the undead versus if you play as somebody like a paladin or a light wizard. Okay? So keep that in mind, that unique challenges are going to present to you depending on your character choices, and all that information is going to be in the Game Master Handbook for the Game Master. So he's going to know, or she's going to know, whether or not you need to fight a certain enemy, what the choices that you have are for each map, for each campaign, when you fight a boss, the different choices. All of that's going to be in the Game Master Handbook, and it's the Game Master's job to facilitate that story unraveling. So the idea behind this game is that the play mechanics are very simple. There's nothing too complicated that you have to do. Just keep track of some simple numbers, some simple movements, a couple of skills per character. So nothing that's extremely complicated, but we wanted to add a level of depth so that it was still very interesting, that you felt connected to your character. We strongly encourage the role-playing elements. Pick your character, give your character a name. Don't just put paladin, but name yourself. We're going to have in the game, we are going to include cards to keep track of all of the hits, the hit points and damage and healing and all this kind of stuff for you. We will also have that resource available to print out from our website for free. So you can just print more of these cards if you need them. And we are working on an application for Android, possibly also iPhones, but right now we're focusing on Android, that will keep track of all of that information for you as well, where you could save your games and keep track of all that. So we're hoping to get the app developed by the time that the game gets sent out, but that's not a guaranteed thing. But for sure, we will include cards for you, so you don't have to just write it on some random piece of paper. That will be included in the game. And if you need to get more of those cards, you can just download the PDF file and print it from home. All right, so I'm going to quickly do a rundown of the different characters based off of their rough class. We have 3 different classes. We have warrior, we have sorcerer or magic, and then we have kind of like a rogue or agility based classes. So the way that this works, we'll do the magic classes first. So this guy here, this is the elemental master. He is kind of your typical mage, uses fire, ice, lightning, and arcane to damage his opponents. He is basically a ranged attacker, but his abilities specialize a little bit more in area of effect or multi-target attacks. Now, everything he does can hit more than one enemy. I'm not going to go into detail about all of their abilities right now. That information can be found on the website. But if you like that kind of magic, blast them away with a big fireball type of person, high damage, a little bit of utility, but really just glass cannon kind of build, somebody like the Elemental Master will work for you. Then we have a Light Wizard. Right, the Light Wizard is basically like an angel incarnate. She does exactly what you would think. She is light, she heals. She can shoot beams of pure light, of pure holy energy to heal her friends or allies while damaging and burning her enemies. She can fly around the battlefield, so she has an ability that lets her move around further than normal. And that's basically what she does, is she calls on the light and uses it to heal her enemies, or heal her allies and burn her enemies. We have the shaman. So the shaman uses earth magic, so she can call on some spirits of the forest for healing. She can summon earth spirits to throw giant boulders at people. She can use lightning, a lightning attack, and she can also command the powers of the wind. We have our Shadowmancer. This is the kind of dark evil, he's an undead character. So he takes bonus damage from holy attacks or healing. He is healed by dark damage. So if somebody were to hit him with a dark attack, it would actually heal him. But if, for example, the Light Wizard blasted him with her holy power, it would deal bonus damage to him. This character summons zombies to fight for him and interacts with those zombies. He has a few other abilities as well. But that's his main feature, is that he can summon zombies and have a little army of zombies that move around the map and fight with him. Then we can move into the warrior class. So starting the warrior class, we have our gladiator. The gladiator is basically what you think of. It's kind of this Roman style, get up close, smash him in the face with his shield, stab him with a sword. He's a master of martial arts, so he can deal high damage, has decent utility, not the strongest or healthiest in the sense of his hit points, but deals a lot of damage and has the ability to heal and stun players. We have the Death Knight. The Death Knight is basically a frozen warrior. His attacks all use frost damage. So he uses a mixture of physical attacks and frost spells, so he's kind of like a hybrid spellcaster. He's one of the tankier characters of the game. He's got the maximum hit points. So his job is really to get up close to people. He tries to keep people from running away. He wants to tank the damage. We have our Paladin. The Paladin is a holy warrior who uses a mixture of healing and holy skills. He imbues his weapons and his hammer and his shield with holy power to, instead of hitting with melee attacks, he uses his shield and his sword to damage his enemies, using them like spells. So he will magically spin his hammer around him to hit enemies in a circle, or he can throw his shield Captain America style, bounce it around, hit a few people in the face with it. Then we have our Berserker. The Berserker is what you might think, kind of this crazy warrior guy. He runs around the field, jumps around the field, hits people with his axe, causes them to take bleed damage. He spins in circles and he's kind of crazy. He has bloodlust, and so whenever he makes somebody bleed, he heals for that. So he's a good choice if you like that kind of fast-paced, in-the-face action. Okay, then let's move on to our agility-based characters. So we have our assassin. She is the master of sneaking around. She's invisible to units that are further away than 2 tiles. She can jump through the shadows to teleport herself. She backstabs. She can spin around throwing knives in circles around her, and she steals life from people and poisons them with her attacks. We have the marksman. The marksman is kind of like the sniper of this game. He gets a bonus when he doesn't move. So every turn that he doesn't move up to 5 turns, he will stack a bonus damage on his attacks, and he has the longest range in the game. He can attack anywhere on the map. And he is able to shoot over certain obstacles. So he can shoot over bushes or rocks, but only if there's certain line of sight from teammates. So he can, if he has a character over here and a bush is in the way, and his teammate can see the enemy on the other side, he can still target them. So it's pretty useful. He's basically a sniper character. We have the hunter. The hunter has a mechanic that works with bushes. So she can actually create bushes, and she can get bonus attacks when in bushes. She also has some pets that she can use to attack with. She uses poison and traps people. So she doesn't have as long a range as the marksman, but she has a little bit more versatility for attack or defense to be able to ambush, hide, that kind of thing. And last on this kind of agility class is the spearman. So he's a really agile warrior. He likes to get in people's face. He has some parry mechanics. He can jump over people. He deals really high damage. Kind of a glass cannon, but he has a little bit more options to deal with other melee users. So, he wants to fight people like the paladin or the berserker, or get close to people and deal high damage to them. And he's a little bit of an acrobatic character. So these are what you would call the science classes. We'll start with the bombardier. So this guy basically uses grenades. He's got a bunch of different grenades and bombs to do stuff. He has some unique crit mechanics where if you don't roll a high enough number with his attacks, then they don't work. The grenades are duds and they don't go off. But if you roll higher than a certain number, it's a guaranteed crit that deals a lot of bonus damage. Everything he does is area of effect. Everything blows up or can target multiple units. But he uses grenades and bombs. We have the undead equivalent of the bombardier. This is the fanatic. This guy is like your mad scientist. He also uses bombs, but his bombs are based off of poison and lightning and just straight up death. So he just kind of goes crazy. He wants to blow people up. He has an ultimate ability that explodes everything on him, kind of like a suicide bomber, except it doesn't hurt him. So he's kind of a fun character if you really want to go crazy and don't care about hurting your friends. We have the alchemist. So she's not really a scientist, but she uses her knowledge of alchemy to transmute the different elements. So she can transmute light and darkness. She can transmute the wind, and she can transmute earth. And she uses those things to support her fellow players, or to attack her enemies, or to heal. And the last one we have here is the Tinkerer. The Tinkerer basically builds turrets or little like robots that attack for her. We use the marker cards to show where her turrets are. She builds 2 different types of turrets that can attack in area of effect or long range for high damage. She can heal from her turrets, or she can heal her turrets. So she's a kind of a fun mechanic where she can build up this little army of machines that basically fight for her. So that's a quick breakdown of the different characters you can play as. Right now, with the launch of the game, we are working on some expansion packs already, and our goal is, if the game is successful, to incorporate mythologies and characters from all around the world. This game, the launch game, is based in Slavic and Norse mythology, so those are the gods that we've used and kind of the inspiration behind some of the characters. But we want to really branch out and go into, Indian, Egyptian, Japanese, Mesoamerican. We're looking at all over the continent, all over the world, different groups and different mythologies that we can incorporate into for expansions, and we're really excited about it. We have a couple that are already under work here, and yeah, that's all.